Hey, what's up, guys? Ryan Schultz here from E39 Source out in San Diego, California. Today, a service and review 2008 E60 M5 Silverstone 2 Metallic early LCI life cycle impulse car. This one was shipped here from Texas for two large services. Number one, you probably guessed it, the manual transmission conversion, and number two, the big E60 job connecting rod bearings. While the car was here, he elected to put it through our MPI process, our multi-point, which uncovered some other needs that the car had, and he addressed the vast majority of those in this service. So, as most of these videos, I'll kind of start at the top, go through. It's no particular order, it's just the way the work order came together, really based on the inspection results, which starts with the undercarriage and wheels, tires, brakes, and suspension, and then moves into the interior and vehicle stored codes and things like that. But before we get too far into all those details, let's take a peek inside and see. I still have to count this. I think it's got to be about number 16, 17, the conversion service. So a legitimate 6-speed now, using all OEM parts, drives like a new car. It's so satisfying to do this and take a car that was just plagued with SMG issues, as the vast majority of them are, and junk it. Literally throw that transmission in a dumpster and put in a good one. He went for the factory shift knob. These are still available, though they are quite expensive. They're only available in the LCI, the 2008 model year or later. We've talked about that before, but this little angle here is different. Your early cars is a quarter round, and this is just a little bit different of a shape. And something I don't know if I've mentioned before on our LCIs, that's orange. It matches the rest of the interior cabin lights in orange, whereas on your 2006 and 2007, that was illuminated in red, like an E39 M5. One of the most difficult pieces to procure is this guy up here, this little storage tray that replaced the old wider storage tray. But this one incorporates our EDC button for electronic dampening control. That's the adjustment switch for your shocks. This is the second to last one left in the world, genuine from BMW. I do have the last one inside. Actually, I did. It's not inside right now. It's off with a manufacturer being scanned for reproduction. So it's a product I hope to bring to the marketplace here sometime in Q1, Q2 of 25. The other thing you've got to change for the LCI 08 Plus E60 M5s is this little switch block here. And there's multiple versions of this depending on how the car's optioned. If you had climate cooled seats and or the active side bolsters, there's additional switches and buttons in here. So maybe there's 4 to 6 different part numbers for that. But on the early M5s, you can just change out the actual button cap to DSC or DTC or ideally MDM, M dynamic mode, and rewire the switch. That's not the case here. Even if you make changes, these are just switches. There's no logic in there, at least so I think, but there must be. But the primary A169 or SCM module is back behind the dash, behind the glove box, back in a big electronics carrier. So you can make the wiring adjustment there. Your old TPMS, tire pressure monitor reset switch, will not work for MDM. You have to change the button block. I don't know why. There's got to be some sort of logic inside of this switch module. As we move on from the transmission conversion service, pop the hood, get a look at the V10. And of course, we can't see the rod bearings. That would be a bad day if we're seeing them from under the hood here. But they've been replaced. This car has just 120,000 miles on it now. Service was completed around 119,940. So we had some quality control miles on the car just to make sure everything shook out right, which it has. But our rod bearing service includes, obviously, all connecting rod bearings, upper oil pan gasket. We do the high pressure Vanos hose as well. That's absolutely the time to do that. You're inside the engine. It's right there. It's still a pain, but that's the time to get it done. And then we also do the motor mount, seeing that the front subframe is removed from the vehicle. So nice full service there, followed up obviously with an oil change, and he's going to be good for another 100,000+ miles here. We do use the BE brand bearings and ARP bolts. When the transmission was off, we found that the rear main seal was leaking, so that's kind of a no-brainer to take care of that at that time, seeing that the clutch and flywheel are removed and you're looking at the back of the crankshaft. So new rear main seal. Moving up to the front axle, we've got quite a bit of suspension work up here, inclusive of front wheel bearings, front pads, rotors, brake pad wear sensors, hardware, all of that. Nice brand new brakes behind these beautiful wheels. Got new front straight wishbone control arms, new front curved thrust arm control arms, as well as new front stabilizer links. The rear axle also received new brakes, pads, hardware, and wear sensors, in addition to the rear upper control arms, which nearly every single 5 and 6 series BMW that we service needs. It's one of those things that nobody else must check. But you look at those upper ball joints out at the wheel carrier, rubber's completely gone. There's no grease left in the fitting. About a third of the time we can grab the wheel carrier and rock it back and forth on the car. It's just a vastly overlooked service for these vehicles. So this one's got 4 new rear upper arms. And of course we follow up the suspension work with a 4-wheel alignment. Back to the driveline, we had a leaking differential input seal, so that's been replaced. Then we pulled the differential out, replaced all 3 differential bushings, and changed the diff fluid while we were at it. Up here he had a bit of a leak just behind the front bumper, kind of where a fog light would be if this weren't an M5. We determined that to be the oil filter housing hoses. There's O-rings on those hoses that go into the filter housing right back here. And those O-rings had turned to plastic and were not sealing oil anymore. We also noted during the inspection that his engine oil cooler miraculously was original. You never find original ones anymore. It's kind of a weak part. Should be replaced at about a 10-year, 100,000 mile interval at the latest. His was still original, so we took care of that preventatively. He had a power steering leak as well. Reservoir is up here on the passenger strut tower, so those low pressure hoses have been replaced. A little bit more under the hood now. We've got fresh cabin air filters, new brake fluid, new power steering reservoir bushings, and we're using the E39 M5 oil filter housing bushings in this application. The factory bushings for this reservoir, the same as the E39 power steering reservoir bushings, are no longer available anywhere in the world. So we've just been using the, unfortunately, more expensive, but still available oil filter housing bushings. Here on the electric fan, we noted that somebody had serviced this before and just cut the zip ties for the electrical harness. That's not ideal. The zip ties are supposed to stay. You're supposed to pop those out of the fan or cowling element here. That wasn't done, so we went ahead and replaced those fasteners so the hose is nice and neat. Kind of pan down to the headlights now, and these things look about 2 billion% better than they did a few weeks ago. This car came in here, being from Texas, I assume it spent a little bit of time in the sun, and these headlights were brown, like looking through a plastic grocery bag. So generally I recommend replacement of the lights. That is still possible. They're still available for the E60. These are of course the option 522 and 524 adaptive and by xenon headlights. They're quite expensive. So we attempted to restore these lights using a new restoration product that actually worked beautifully. They're not perfect. They don't look 100% new, but they sure look a heck of a lot better. Also with the headlights, the customer had supplied these side gaskets, which I did not realize were still available. So we've got a fresh seal all the way out to here for both lights. And do be aware that those gaskets have different part numbers for your xenon light, which incorporate this little access door, and the non-xenon light. Initially, he had supplied the incorrect parts, so we had to source the xenon versions. We've got fresh hood struts, no need for a clamp anymore. You should be able to close the hood about yay far. A little bit of a push, and it springs itself back up. Those are cheap parts and they're easy to install. You might also notice up top, we've got a nice fresh windshield cowl. The old one had faded to gray and had a lot of cracking in that rubber strip there against the glass. Windshield washer system was inoperable, so that pump has been replaced and we're back in business. I'm gonna move around to the rear of the car. He had previously replaced this upper seal. It's real common that these crack and just dry out, start flaking apart there in the corner. So that was already done, but the bottom seal hadn't been done. So we went ahead and installed the rubber seal down at the base of the glass. Real minor thing in here, but the inspection uncovered that these little clips that keep these augment doors, as BMW calls them, closed and locked, were both missing. So we've sourced those and reinstalled them. The original M5 badge was almost monotone. It had completely faded out. So we've got a nice, vibrant, fresh one now. Fuel cap was original, tether was broken, and it was not sealing the tank very well. Now it's good. The inspection uncovered that there was some missing hardware here in the passenger footwell. There's a handful of screws up there holding that trim in place, and a sloppy technician in the past had lost one, so we went ahead and replaced that. The inspection uncovered that this M5 only had one working horn. There are actually two. There's a high tone and a low tone that work together to create the M5 horn sound, and I forget which one had failed, but we replaced that. As we tested that, the second horn then immediately failed, so we replaced that as well, and now he's got two working horns. Since our customers owned this car, the PDC, or park distance control, had not worked. It just gives an error message every time you put it in reverse or turn the system on manually, and the light on the control panel flashes. Code we had stored for it was for supply of sensor harness. So we had quite a bit of diagnosis with this car. We initially checked fuses, powers, and grounds to the module. All of that was fine. We listened for clicks at the sensors. We had clicks at all 8 sensors. We then tried a second PDC module, and that didn't make any sort of a difference, even after coding or programming to this specific vehicle. So then it came down to chasing wires out directly from the module, which is in the trunk, to every harness. And every wire had continuity. At that point, I went and grabbed a spare PDC sensor that I had, and we just started replacing the sensors one at a time, where we determined that this sensor right here was faulty and had a short circuit internally to the sensor. I've never seen a sensor fail in that way, but this one did. So bumper was on and off several times. We've actually got new brackets. They were really brittle. Those black plastic brackets that justify the bumper here to the fender alignment have been replaced. Right now the system is working. I do believe the sensor's sporadic. Customer's aware of that and is going to replace it at a later date. Lastly here, we'll talk about wheels and tires. Of course, the original style 166 E60 M5 wheels. These were pretty pitted, peeling, a little bit of curb rashing, but more notably, I believe 3 of the 4 wheels had pretty significant bends. So they've been refinished and straightened to the best of our refinisher's ability. They came back. I still was not happy with the balance, so we went ahead and did a complimentary road force tire balance on these wheels as well, which did make a big difference. The way that was manifesting itself was with cold tires. I'm talking first thing in the morning as you get the vehicle to speed 45 to 65 miles an hour. If you let go of the wheel, you had a little bit of a shake, and a BMW should not do that, especially with a fresh front suspension, fresh alignment, refinished wheels, and good Michelin tires. So the road force balance did make a big improvement. Though these wheels aren't perfect, can't be made to be perfect again, and ideally should be replaced at some time in the future, but I think it's very livable for now. Get a brief peek inside before we wrap this video up. The interior on this M5 is really, really beautiful. These rear door panels are pretty much perfect. That's option 737A aluminum shadow trim, which is my all-time favorite in the E60. It's so much nicer than the E39's aluminum trim because it's actual metal instead of plastic. It's got a beautiful texture to it. Back seat, like many BMWs, pretty much flawless. And we do have an Alcantara headliner in this one, which surprisingly was optional throughout the E60 M5 production. Up to the front, he's aware of the steering wheel wear. He had sent me a kind of an aftermarket redone wheel to see my thoughts on it. I didn't think it fit the rest of the car and was really done honestly very well, so we're returning that to him, and he's going to deal with that in the future. Unfortunately, you cannot buy these anymore from BMW. They just don't exist. He supplied us with this front left M5 door sill, which has been installed, and we do leave this tape on here and let the owner have the satisfaction of peeling that off and revealing the perfect sill. Hop inside, fire this guy up. This is a completely stock, unmodified exhaust system on this car, which is pretty refreshing after some of the hack jobs that we do get in here, but it is quite quiet. Nice and quiet. Still hear those injectors ticking away as they do in these S85 and S65 powered cars. And if I obey the law and put a seatbelt on here, we'll have yet another E60 M5 without a single warning light or notification in check control. It's a beautiful thing. There we go. Look at that. I always show off some of the goodies here at the end, but we hit the M. That's programmed for MDM mode or M dynamic mode in the suspension. Of course, our MDM button here can be used to manually toggle that outside of M mode. And my favorite, you press and hold the MDM button for a complete and full defeat of the traction control system with DSC off. Mileage as of January 16th sits at 120,034. That's a wrap on the 2008 E60 M5 from Texas. Owner's flying out tomorrow into San Diego International to pick this up and drive it back home. And I think he's going to have a blast doing that. This thing is so much fun to drive, smooth and stable with the fresh suspension. Really a transformed vehicle. If you've got an E60 M5 or E63/E64 M6 and are interested in any of the services we provide, multi-point inspection, manual transmission conversion, or connecting rod bearings, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly, Ryan at E39source.com. I'd love a chance to work with you. Thanks for watching this one, guys. We'll talk in the next. Take care.